What's up, everyone? It's your boy Joshua Joshi Howard, and today we're going to be doing a tier list. Whoa, about all of the Astra Militarum units. I've now had a chance to play with just about everything, and I have at least like some opinion on almost everything that we currently have in the Codex. And honestly, I've been kind of reluctant to do tier lists a lot in the past because I feel like a tier list tells you more about the person making the tier list than anything that you actually put on a tier list. But it's easy content to make. It's fun to do, and I think it's also really funny, like watching Morty and Glory just hate on everybody else's tier list. So I figured I might as well get a chance to talk about that as well. Before we get too far, before we even start talking about it, I just want to talk about how the way that I do tier lists, and again, this goes back to the tier list tells you more about me than it does about anything on the tier list. Is I don't do like how good something is in terms of just like tiers, right? I do it in how I think about it in terms of list building and list design. And instead of having like S through D tier, I have a bunch of other tiers. The first one is build around tier. Anything that goes in build around tier is something that is so good that you put it in and then you kind of figure out how can I make these pieces better, or what do I need to do in order to make these pieces able to do their job. And this is just things that have been so good for so long. This was something like in the Index, the Leman Russ tank commander that was just so good that you could put it in and you would do other things to make the rest of your army play around it. This would also be like the Rogel Dorn during the Index as well. Independently good are pieces that are just they're just very efficient stats wise. They are just something that is good, and you're going to generally put it in you can put it in almost any list, and nobody's going to bat an eye. They're like, oh, yeah, that unit is good. It makes sense why it is in any list that you look at. After that, we have detachment dependent. And detachment dependent is where we start getting into units that you really have to look for ways to make them better from other rules, right? These are things that you you can only really play them in like one detachment. They're only really useful in like one spot, or maybe not all detachments, maybe not just one detachment, but you can't play them in every detachment and expect to have success with them. And then lastly is our next we have meta dependent, and meta dependent are tech pieces. If you're used to playing any like TCGs, these are the pieces that you put in your list because you know that there's a bunch of people going to your event that play this one specific style, and if you put these cards in your deck, you put these units in your list, you have better matchups against those people. So if an easy example is the Primaris Psyker is better if you have like a ton of Thousand Suns players in your local area, simply because they give the 4 Feel No Pain up against psychic attacks. However, most people don't need that because we have a winning matchup into Thousand Suns anyway, so it's not necessarily an important tech piece to put into most armies. And then lastly, we have units that are overcosted, undertuned, and good for Crusade. Like they aren't units that you really see a point to taking kind of ever, because there's either something that just does the same thing better, or like they're just bad, right? Like you just don't have a reason to put them in. They don't have the output. And these are things kind of like the new Manticore, which we'll go ahead and talk a little bit more about when we get there, where it just it's just really overpriced. And yeah, so I'm going to talk about most units at their current power level, but I'm going to talk about a couple of units, and I will make sure to call out when I'm talking about these units that I'm talking about them in like a future tense when they have their points fixed, whenever like something about them that currently doesn't work is taken care of. With that, I'm going to take a sip of my Arizona iced tea and we'll get going. All right. So I'm just gonna go kind of across in no particular order. This is just the order that they were in whichever whoever made this. I think this is actually something that David Gaylord and 40K Fireside used at some point. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with the Cadian Castellan, and the Castellan is a unit that I'm definitely going to be putting in detachment dependent, and the Castellan was a unit that in the index I thought was utter trash, right? Like every time I saw someone put in a Castellan in their list, I was like, hey, I'm on Reddit, I'm on Discord, hey, I'm building my first list, and I'll see like one, two, or sometimes three Castellans, and I'll be like, Get this out of the list. This is a waste of your points. And my opinion on the Castellan has changed a little bit in the Codex, but I still don't think it's that good. And the main reason for this is you have to look at what the leader actually does. The leader does, I think it's 2 orders, and gives the unit sustained and the ability to fall back and shoot. And the orders are kind of nice, like they are a strict buff. Sustained is also functionally equivalent to +1 to hit, so if you attach a Castellan to a unit of Cadians and you give them take aim, you're effectively +2 to hit. And then fall back and shoot is okay, but the reason why I really don't think the Castellan is particularly useful in most lists is those are abilities we don't care about. One of the major things that you always look at with a unit is not how much damage does it do, but does it do the job that you put it in the list to do. And Kazarkin already have the damage that they need in order to kill 5 Scout Marines or 5 JPIs or whatever, like a unit of cultists. They're going to kill all of your opponent's skirmishing units pretty much all the time. You don't need them to do more damage than they already do, which is what the Castellan does for them. And the other thing is when you get charged, like when a Kazarkin unit gets charged, you're going to lose almost the entire unit to anything that is worth charging into Kazarkin. And at that point, the Castellan doesn't do anything because the unit is dead. You might have like 1 or 2 guys left over, and yes, they're going to be special weapons, but at this point, you've just made your unit just an extra 50-something points in order to give it an ability that it doesn't need anyway. So that's why I don't really love the Castellan. The places where I do like the Castellan, I think it is useful in Mechanized, because in Mechanized, we really want our Kazarkin to punch up. We want our Kazarkin to do more damage than the datasheet is generally expected to do, and that's where these buffs really matter. I also think it's okay in Recon, where you also just you want like 1 or 2 command blobs that just run around and give out cheap orders, and I think that's where the Castellan like really shines, is in those 2 detachments. Next we have Cadian Command Squad. I'm gonna put it right next to the Cadian Castellan. I'm gonna put it a little bit higher than the Castellan because I do think that the Cadian Command Squad works better with other units, and it has one of the best abilities in terms of what the command squads actually do. Being on an objective and giving your unit benefit of cover was something that was unique to the infantry squads in the index, and in this, it's nice because it pairs really well in the recon detachment, and it's pretty good in combined, and it's okay in siege, simply because it is a way to transmit your orders over a long range with when being combined with another unit that we're going to look at in a bit. And it's also a good way, it's like a really good holder of, I think it's called Eager Advance in the siege attachment, where you can just give a unit of 20 Cadians the ability to scout 6, which is really big on a couple of deployments. So it's okay. You mostly want to play this in Recon and Siege, and you can kind of play it in Indet or the Combined Arms, but you don't really ever play it in Combined. You don't play it in every detachment just because you don't always care about the ability that it provides. All right, next, the Commissar. The Commissar is an interesting one for me to place because on the one hand, it is kind of independently good on account of it is a 30-point body with OC, which is fine because the abilities are actually terrible. Like you do not care about any of the abilities that the Commissar actually has. And so for a lot of people who are like, I want to take a Commissar because he gives orders and he helps with battle shock, everyone who's taking him for that reason, the Commissar is in the worst tier. Overcosted, undertuned, and maybe good for Crusade. I don't play a lot of Crusade, so I don't really know if he gets better over the course of Crusade. But I'm going to put the Commissar in independently good, just because if you have 30 points left over at the end of the list, sure, you can put a Commissar in there and he's going to run around and score a secondary for you at some point. And, you know, if I saw a Commissar in someone like David Gaylord or Nassim Fouchain's list, I'd be like, okay, I understand why this is in here. But if I look at someone who's like going to their first event, who is just like trying to get into the game, I know that this unit is not being used properly. And so I have like mixed feelings about which one of these to put it in. But I'm going to put it in independently good for the people who do understand what it's actually being used for. Next, Gaunt's Ghost. This is like the perfect example of a unit that is just independently good. Gaunt's Ghost is a card that, again, using TCG ideas, like Gaunt's Ghost says, do whatever you want a little bit better, right? You give orders in Bridgehead. You screen out your backfield in Combined Arms. You um, use it for secondaries in basically every detachment. And it has a place, like, if you put it in literally any detachment, in literally any guard army, I'd be like, yeah, that's fine. Like, it's just an efficient unit. It has every rule you can possibly think of. Sometimes the damage force sniper is really funny. You just, you see it everywhere, and there's a reason for that. Okay, next, we're going to talk about Lord Solar. And we're going to put Lord Solar actually at the top of the attachment dependent because Lord Solar is a unit that currently, with a couple of nerfs that have come his way since the index, where he's gone up in points and he can only order regiment and squadron units, he doesn't have the broken combos with our abhumans or our super heavies that would actually make them really good. Instead, Lord Solar has mostly become, I want orders, or I want orders. I want a like piece that is more durable than people think it is because it's still a 4-up invul 8 wound body, and you want the CP generation. So I have played variations of lists in like Hammer the Emperor and Mechanized Assault, where I'm like, I really want Lord Solar so that I'm not spending CP to use the officer in a transport to order the transport stratagem. I put it in Hammer because that detachment wants a lot of CP, and he can order like your Toraxes, he can order like your Doran tank commanders so that the rest of your army can move around a little bit more efficiently. However, I don't want to put him in Siege, I don't want to put him in Combined, I really don't want to put him in Bridgehead because he doesn't really suit the theme. He's not necessarily doing things that those detachments want him to. And so he's good, but you have to understand that he has a place in certain lists, and you're not going to put him in everything. Okay, next. The Militarum Tempestus Command Squad. This is one of the best units in the entire codex, and it is a unit that honestly is defining the meta right now in a way that a lot of people, I think, don't really appreciate unless you understand how guard lists are built. If you look at Pyra Cup, which is a very strong tournament that has been happening in Poland this last weekend, where I think it's 6 of the 7 top WTC teams have been playing in basically like a round robin against each other in order to prep and test out new players. What you will see is there are 8 players playing Bridgehead. One on every team is playing Bridgehead, and every single one of them is playing 3 Militarum Tempestus command squads. Some of them are playing more units of Scions after that, but everyone is playing at least 3 Militarum Tempestus command squads with Scions, and a lot of very strong players will say any unit of Scions without a command squad is just okay, right? Like, you don't necessarily want to take Scions or units of 10 Scions without a command squad, and because of that, the Tempestus command squad is just such a huge force multiplier that you want to take it in the list where it's good. It is the defining piece of the list. It is the defining piece of Bridgehead. It is still very good in Combined. There's other detachments that, like, if you put this unit in anything, in any detachment, it would be fine, right? If you're going to take a unit of a Tempestus Command Squad with 5 signs and put them in a Torox or a Torox Prime in Mechanized Assault, it's like, yeah, sure. If you just take this unit and 10 signs and you put it in Hammer the Emperor, so, like, it's a little weird, but, like, the unit is just so efficient anyway that it might be worth your time. You can put this in Siege because there's a no Overwatch enhancement. You can put this in Combine. Like, it's good everywhere. And the detachments where it is really good, it is the centerpiece of the army. Platoon Command Squad doesn't exist anymore. Okay, let's go ahead and start talking about our tech pieces. So the first one is the Primaris Psyker. And the Primaris Psyker is a unit that I think it's a lot of hype from the, I'm gonna call them casual, the narrative community. And it's a unit that was better in the index than it is in the codex because it lost 2 shots. Instead of being d6 plus 3, it's now d6 plus 1 attack, so the damage is just down. You're going from an average of 6.5 attacks to 4.5 attacks, which is which is a pretty big deal, right? Like that's 30% of yeah, that's about 30% of your damage just gone because you do not have as many shots. The other major thing that it lost the combination of being played alongside a Deathcore Marshal. So you can consider putting this unit in an army, but the reason why you're doing it is because there's a lot of like weirdly high AP anti-chaff shooting. So if there's a lot of Chaos Knights in your army where they have the Brigands where they get the bonus AP, then having the 4-up invul actually matters. If you're playing it in a meta where like there's just a weird number of Grey Knights and Thousand Suns in your local meta, like the 4-up Feel No Pain against Psychic is nice. However, it is not good enough on its own to really be justified being played in anything, honestly. Like it's just fine, but it becomes really good depending on what you're playing against. Same thing for the Tech Priest Engine Seer. I'm actually going to put the Tech Priest Engine Seer a little bit higher than the Psyker simply because the armies that you put this in your army to tech against are more common. Um, the major things, so the Tech Priest Engine Seer is not a unit that is particularly exciting on its own. It is okay. And the main things that you want it for is playing against armies that rely on low volume, very high quality, very high damage shots. So if you're playing in a meta where there's a lot of Repulsor Executioners, or whatever the one that has the D6 plus 4 damage shots in Marines, or you're playing against something like a bunch of Tau where they have railguns that ignore cover, or you're playing against Chaos Knights who just run around with their thermal spears, which is just AP4. You come off the board edge 9 inches away, and you're within your Melta 4 range. The Tech Priest Engine Seer is really good for these metas because you really need your opponent to be putting you on worse than a 4-up anyway, which is not most armies. Most armies will have like las cannons, which are AP3, and as long as you're in cover, which you should be, you're saving on a 4-up anyway. And the little bit of extra durability by healing D3 per turn doesn't come up all that often. It depends a lot on what you're trying to do and trying to take advantage of a local meta that you think is not prepared for 4-up invuls on your tanks. And so it's like, it's okay. But it is the kind of thing where you need to understand that you're doing it to beat your local players, not because it's just inherently good as a unit. Next, we got Sly Marbo. And Sly Marbo hovers between these. Attachment dependent or independently good. I think right now, honestly, he could probably go in any of these. I'm going to put him in detachment dependent because I think he has places in anything where Ursula Creed is just going to be taken, right? Rambo or Marbo being lone up, I'm gonna move him down to meta dependent. I think he's okay, but I also think he's like one of the stronger units in meta dependent because he's really good at dealing with indirect metas, right? He's just lone up. Your opponent's indirect can't shoot him. He's particularly good actually in recon because you have the 12-inch denial stratagem. So he can actually just become impossible to charge, impossible to shoot because if they haven't moved within 12 inches to shoot him in the first place, you just use the stratagem and say, you can't move here, right? You cannot land within 12 inches of me, so you can't shoot me. It makes him very good at doing things like recover assets and sabotage because as long as you make him safe from charges, he can't be tagged. But he's okay, right? He's a cheap infiltrate. If you need just like an extra infiltrator, Marbo can do that. If you need like just a cheap lone up because there's a lot of indirect in your meta, Marbo can do that. He's really good at helping some specific matchups or playing like specific game plans, and that's why he's not. He could be independently good because if you just put him in whatever detachment, it's like, And I think that's why we're putting in meta dependent. Is you would first look at it and go like, why is this here? And that's why we're gonna put it there. Okay. Next, I think this is the Leman Russ Tank Commander. I'm gonna do his Leman Russ Tank Commander. This is just overcosted garbage right now. That's what it is right now. And there's a part of me that wants to put it in independently good, because of where I think it is going to go. I expect that currently at 235, it's just overcosted garbage. It is for 5 more points you can get a Rogel Dorn, which is +1 toughness, +5 wounds, and has a rule that's not quite as good, but you just do so much more damage. You lost 2 shots in the Demolisher Cannon. Um, it's really good in Crusade, actually. Maybe that's why I should put it here, is because you can get buffs where you just get like extra shots or like sustained or lethal on the main gun. It's just overcosted, and I think it's really sad. It is a little bit better now that it has 2 orders, but yeah, it's just too much. Okay, Creed build around, build around or independently good. It's definitely very strong here. I think this has to go into build around because you take this in most of your detachments. You don't need it in hammer, but it's good in all the other ones. Like it's good in combined. It's really good in combined. It's absolutely nuts in bridgehead. It's good in mechanized. It's good in siege. Fine in recon. But the main thing is that they're just like such powerful combos with Creed because of the cheap stratagems that you get and the fact that you can target regiment units for it. So you're basically getting just like free stratagems every single turn, and Guard has a lot of really good stratagems that you can use. The orders for Creed are actually like you want them, you want to get them off, simply because you want to do every buff that you can, but you don't need them. Um, you would I would say in like 80 to 90% of cases, you care more about being able to use a stratagem on the subsequent battle round, and therefore you need to keep Creed alive than it is to actually get her to give orders. And that's why I think she's like build around. She's just such an integral part of several of our detachments. She is such an integral part of being able to play certain playstyles. It would be very hard to play most bridgehead lists as they currently exist without Creed because of how important she is to making all of those stratagems cheap and being able to farm CP off of Voxcasters. So Creed, really good. You put her in almost every list except maybe Hammer, and then you're going to have a better list. All right. Okay. Let's go ahead and talk about Cadians. Cadians I'm going to put in independently good, and I'm going to put them ahead of the Commissar because Cadians, they're very good in some detachments, but they have a place in every detachment. And especially in current metas where Eldar and Guard and Space Marines are all running indirect, and just the amount of like heavy deep strike that currently exists in the meta, having Cadians with sticky, it's just good. You want most lists will want 1 unit of Cadians just for that ability, and then combined and siege want at least like 120 bricks so that you can actually play for the middle of the board, play for your natural, just go sticky it, and then ask your opponent how they're going to deal with resurrecting sticky objectives. Next, Krieg, detachment dependent. I think Krieger is just kind of meh. They really relied on the Deathcore Marshal to be like getting to that next level. I think they are only really playable in Recon. Yeah, they don't get more special weapons, right? Because they get the same number as Cadians. Their rule is different than Cadians, because you do more damage. But yeah, I mean they're fun in Siege. You can give them like a Krieg command squad, and then you take the Furious Fusillade. I've heard both. And then you just get like a lot of shots that are +1 to hit, and sometimes +1 to wound. But it's not really that playable outside of Siege, so it's here. All right, Katachan, independently good, and these are the top of independently good. If you start every list that you have with 1 to 3 Katachan, it's hard to go wrong. Simply because they take up so much board space that, like, they're good. I've said this multiple times. I'll say it again. Katachan are in the running for the best cultist equivalent unit in the entire game. And the 3 things that you generally expect from cultists or similar units in order to be really good are if you have Scout, Sticky, and OC2. If you have any two of those things, you are a very good unit. And Katachan at 55 points in the index were criminally undercosted. Now they're still pretty good, but they're in contention with like Kroot Carnivores and Skatari Vanguard, whichever the scouting or whichever the sticky ones are. Not the like OC reduction ones, whichever one the sticky are. Still just some of the best cultists in the entire game. Okay. Chimera. Unfortunately, I'm gonna put it right now at 85 points in the top of overcosted. It is okay. The reason why I'm not putting it in detachment dependent, because I still think it has a place in combined in particular, is because it's the only one where you can play it. The others have like you can play it in like one or multiple detachments, or at least they're not out of place in second detachments. I know some people are gonna say the Chimera is good and mechanized, and it's like, yeah, if you put like a lot of support into it, like you take the Engine Seer with the Sacred Unguents enhancement, then it becomes okay. Um, it's just too expensive, so it really relies on lethal hits. Thorax Prime, this one goes in detachment dependent. Hmm. Yeah, probably at the bottom of detachment dependent. It really only is exciting in mechanized right now because you just want to get multiple units that are rerolling hits, rerolling wounds against targets on objectives. One you do with the strat, one of them you do with the Thorax Prime. Like it's solid. It's just slower than the Thorax, and the Thorax needs to go up in points in order to really make the Thorax Prime more interesting. I don't think the Thorax Prime is too expensive. Maybe it could go down 5 points, but yeah, the little brother, the Thorax is absolutely built around. It is nuts in Bridgehead. It is nuts in Mechanized, and it is good in the others. Like it still has a place in Combined. Um, I don't know if it's good in Siege. It's probably good in Siege. I haven't played it in Siege actually. Well, it's probably fine. It's just so good. One of the things that Guard has been severely lacking since we lost easy access or like good access to Bulgrin is the ability to dig enemies out from behind walls, and Thoraxes are a detachment independent way to do that. They are best in Hammer the Emperor, and they're still very good in every other detachment. Simply because of the amount of threat projection this unit actually provides you, and the ability to get into places where units could not otherwise get to. Aegis Defense Line, Armored Sentinel. Hmm. I I want to put it in meta dependent, but I don't even know what it's teching against is the problem. So I think it has to go in overcosted. The problem with the Armored Sentinel is it doesn't do anything. Like back when you could take units of 3 of them, it was okay because you would just like throw them out and they would compete with Bulgrin for just taking up a ton of space and being really annoying to remove. Now that you can only take them in units of 2, they don't do any damage, they don't take up a lot of real estate. Um, so like they just need to come down in points because there's not, or I guess everything else would have to go up in points in order to make this like really worthwhile. It doesn't benefit from the recon detachment rule basically at all because I guess you can stand in the open in recon, whereas in everywhere else you would have to like stand in actual cover. So I guess it is slightly better there. I don't know. It's not very good. However, his little brother, the Scout Sentinel, is independently good. I think it's probably worse than Cadian's, but better than the Commissar. Yeah, I mean, you can just put this in basically any detachment. You probably don't put it in Bridgehead because we're rerolling ones with our entire army anyway, but it's good in Hammer, it's decent in Combined, it's decent in Siege. You know, you point at something, you say, I'm rerolling ones against that thing. You go do area denial, you establish a locus with it, and then, you make your army shoot a little bit better. It's fine. It's just, you know, there's no, there's never a reason why you're like, man, I really wish this Scout Sentinel just wasn't in a list. It's like, sure, like, you have some points left over. Maybe it is the best thing to help out some of your other armies. or other units in your army. Tillen Rough Riders. These are definitely in detachment dependent, but I think they're good. Like that's the thing. They are quite good in the detachments where they are good in. They definitely have a place in combined in Bridgehead. They're decent in siege. They're okay in siege. They're not good in mechanized, but I mean solar. I think solar you'd want solar more. I think probably this because the big thing that the Tillen Rough Riders do is they're just really good at being like, hey, get off me, stay over there in melee matchups, and in matchups where you're playing up against shooting, they are your rapid ingress threat because guard is really lacking in good rapid ingress threats right now. It's basically just the Tillen Rough Rider. Uh, Everyone that's not Bridgehead can do it with a Scion unit. That's about it. So I mean they're good, but they're only good in a couple of detachments, and they're just like they're more playstyle dependent, I think, than they are even detachment dependent. Simply because you just want to have horses that are just a really effective trading piece. I think this one is the Baneblade. Unfortunately, the Baneblade is. I mean, now that it can't be ordered by Lord Solar, like it is okay in Hammer of the Emperor, and it's not playable anywhere else. It's got a lot of barrels. It's got a lot of guns. Those guns are okay. That's about it. This one is this the Storm Sword or the Bane Sword? I can't tell. I think this is Storm Sword. Is that the Storm Sword? I think so. Okay, I'm gonna rate it as though it's the Storm Sword. This is the best. Super heavy. Like, Shadow Sword is the worst super heavy. Um, let's just do all the super heavies real quick. Actually, Shadow Sword is not the worst one. It's the Vulcan Mega Cannon. I don't know what this one is. I think this is the Bane Sword. Bane Sword is about here. Nah, it's about here. It's not that good. I don't know what this one is, but it's better than these two. Am I missing anything? This one doesn't exist anymore. Um, this is the Doom Hammer. Wait, is the Doom Hammer on here twice? Whichever one of these is the Doom Hammer is like okay. If you happen to be running into a lot of avatars of Cain or Catan in your meta for some reason, like sure, you can put one of these in here. Yeah, all these are just too expensive. Every single one of them needs to come down at least 50 points before you even consider taking them to a tournament that you're trying to win, and not just a tournament you're trying to be the guy that brought a super heavy. Okay. Let's keep going. Yeah, super heavy is just they can't be ordered, man. Like if they pop smoke, your 500, 400 point unit just loses a third of its efficiency. Ugh, it's terrible. Okay. Basilisk, meta dependent. I think it's here. I think the Psyker is just like really unimpressive. I mean, we know what this does. It's weaker now. It's best in siege, but it's not even like better than its competitors in siege. It's just best in siege. If we were playing, if you're playing in a team's environment and your team is like, look, Mr. Guard player, we need you to be specifically good into Creations of Bile and Renegade Raiders and Blood Angels, then you can put a Basilisk in there. That's about it. Okay. Bulgren. Ooh, this is yeah. Bulgren at 220, they did get a slight upgrade from the index where they have a 3+ save, but you don't really notice that almost ever because the times where this was coming up, I guess it makes you slightly more durable against AP1 weapons, but there aren't a lot of AP1 weapons in the meta anyway. Yeah, they're just too expensive, and the fact that they can't be ordered by Lord Solar just makes them they're either close to the top of overcosted or at the very bottom of meta dependent. I think I'll put them at the very bottom of meta dependent because in similar metas where you just need to have just like this brick wall, you would consider putting in 1 unit of 6 Bullgren, and that's about it. They relied on having the move 9 to do more than just stand somewhere really effectively, and now they're too slow to even get to the place where they want to stand that effectively. All right, Ogren. Ogren are not as good as the as the Castellan, because the Ogren are also only really interesting in Bridgehead and Mechanized, but you would put a Castellan in Mechanized before you would in Ogren. And some people at Pirate Cup are also playing Ogren in their Bridgehead, just because they're cheap. Like if I made a tier that was just like in between independently good and detachment dependent that just said this unit is good because it's dirt cheap, um, Ogren are like one of the best in that. Manticore. What is this? Field Awareness Battery. Field Awareness Batteries are detachment dependent. I actually think they're pretty good in detachment dependent. They're pretty good in siege and they're pretty good in bridgehead. The reroll ones and or the ignore cover help a lot because they're low AP. And in a meta where we want to be able to kill elves and we want to be able to kill scout marines and infiltrators and jump back intercessors, having 1 unit of a field awareness battery is part of like a really core part of your bridgehead or your siege regiment list where you're just trying to kill marines or small bodies behind walls, and they're fairly directly competing with like the Taurox in terms of the job that you actually want them for. You're using them to kill things that are hiding from you, and the Taurox is just super good because it is useful everywhere, whereas a field ordnance battery needs a little bit more punch in order to be useful, which is why you tend to see it in bridgehead and siege and nowhere else. Cadian Heavy Weapon Squad. Ooh. This is an interesting one because the Cadian Heavy Weapon Squad is the worst heavy weapon squad. The Overwatch ability is basically irrelevant. Um, I'm gonna put this one in meta dependent and just above Bullgren. The main reason why I think you would play Cadian Heavy Weapon Squads are because you already have 3 Catachan Heavy Weapon Squads, and for some reason you want more mortars. If you want your 12th, 15th, or 18th mortar, you're going to take Cadians, and that's really about it. Oh, I missed a super heavy. I don't remember which one this is, so it's probably bad. Okay, Hellhound. This one's interesting because I'm struggling to write lists that were like, yeah, I wish I had a Hellhound. I think they have a place in Combined. I think they have a place in Siege. I think they have a place in Hammer, which means that they would be detachment dependent because that is enough detachments where they are like worth thinking about. Yeah, I don't know. It's just a stat block, right? Like it's just a stat block. Where like, yeah, it's okay. You don't put it in every detachment, or you wouldn't consider it in even most detachments, which is why it doesn't make it into one of the higher ones. But it's there. Yeah. Ignore cover. T10 2+ save. Like if you've been playing against Marines at all recently, and they have like ballistas running around everywhere, then you know just like it's just an annoying body to remove. That's about it. Hydra. It's somewhere in here. Um, I would want to play it in combined arms. I would want to play it in hammer. Or I'd consider playing it in those. That's good enough. I think this is a little bit better than either of these. The Hydra is just it's just fairly efficient. It was much more efficient at 85 because it was pretty aggressively costed in the index, and at 95, like it doesn't really do any damage. Like if you put a lot of support behind it, if you pair it with hellhounds, if you pair it with exterminators, it starts to become like pretty efficient. But otherwise, it's something that your opponent has to shoot at with something real. So it is a good like second wave trading piece. It's something you're going to put out on an objective on turn 2. But you also won't really be sad if this is the thing that ends up cleansing an objective because now you have 3 OC on an objective, your opponent has to deal with it, and sometimes you get to bonus shoot with it, and sometimes you get a bonus tank shock with it. So it's fine. Kazarkin. Kazarkin are independently good. They're probably actually like really independently good. You don't really build lists with like I'm going to kill their skirmishing pieces with Kazarkin because they are so good at that job and we are going to build the rest of the list around it. No, they're not that good, but they are so good at that job that you can play them in every detachment and nobody's gonna bat an eye. Like they are really good. Like I start bridgehead lists with 2 units of Kazarkin. I would definitely think about putting at least one in siege and combined, and you take a lot of them in hammer. I think the one that they are probably the least exciting in is recon, and they're still fine there. So they are just some of the best skirmishing units in the entire game, and they have upside into vehicles with the Melta Mine. It's pretty good. Alright, Leman Russ, Battle Tank. This is detachment dependent. Yeah. This is... So the reason why I'm going to put it in detachment dependent, as I think about exactly where it goes, is a lot of the things where I look at them here and put them in meta dependent is because they're oftentimes like they're only really played in one detachment and they're only really played if there are certain other things in the meta. But I think we're gonna put the Leman Russ Battle Tank at the top of detachment dependent because it is so good in the one detachment that you take it in. It is so good in combined, simply because re-rolling hits with lethal hits is just an incredibly powerful ability, and it is almost like if it came down 10 points, if it was like a 165, this would be in build around for sure. Like you would put it in combined arms, you would put like 3 of them in combined arms. There's still arguments that you maybe put that many in combined anyway, and you would play them in other detachments. As it is, it relies a lot on lethals. It's on like the expensive side, at least internally within the Guard Codex, of something that you would just put in every list. Um, but it is just so good in combined arms that is probably deserving of detachment dependent. Punisher sucks. This tank is just bad. Like there might come a meta where the Punisher Gatling cannon is actually relevant, and the fact that it's still not relevant in the current meta is one of the harshest indictments I think we can make against the Punisher, because when we have a meta where Guard Bridgehead and Tactical Brigade and what else is there? I mean, those are the two biggest ones. Where these two are some of the strongest armies in the game, and they're very infantry focused, or like guys in vehicles, and you still don't want to take the Punisher. I can't think of a meta where I would want one. It's probably good in Crusade though. Um, what if I added another one? Add a row below. Good for Crusade, smiley face. I think we're actually going to put it in its own thing, where I think if you're trying to win an event, you can't take any of these units. And I no longer care about what order they're in because they're just not playable. Vanquisher. Okay, so Vanquisher is an interesting one. The Vanquisher is... I think it's detachment dependent, but I think more than detachment dependent, it is playstyle dependent. And there are 2 dominant schools of thought that I hear people talk about the Vanquisher with, and that it is good as a one of, or it is only good as a like a one of, or it is only good as a three of. And I'm going to challenge Morty and Glory here because the first person who said the Vanquisher was good, that is a reputable sort, like a reputable person in the community, is David Purcell, Dingbat. He comes into regular guest on my channel, and David Purcell was one of the first people who's just like, yeah, if we just assume like a Leman Russ hull is worth 140 points, and I spend 5 points to get a Vanquisher cannon on top of that, that's pretty cool. And then the other major thing that you end up seeing is, do you play it as a backline tank or as a frontline tank? And the Vanquisher, I think, from the top players who are actually playing a Vanquisher are playing it as a frontline tank. And the main reason for that is, as David Gaylord said, it's a toughness 10 or toughness 11, 2 plus 13 wound body. And Gaylord said he's taking it with like triple flamers, but David Purcell is like, yeah, you put double multi-meltas and a las cannon on this thing, you let your opponent charge it, and then you don't care because you just go boom, multi-meltas, boom, then you just like shoot things point blank. And if you just put like 3 of these on or near the middle objective, that's just a lot of shooting that you can do with it. It controls firing lanes, and once you have 3 Vanquisher cannons, if your opponent kills a Vanquisher, darn, now they have 2 Vanquishers shooting back at them. So I think this is more like playstyle dependent than anything else, but I don't have a tier for that because that depends more on you than it does on anything else. I think it's probably about here for me. As an efficient pile of stats, it is better than the Hydra, but it's another one where, just like Ogren, their rules are so whatever. Their rules are so irrelevant that it just becomes a question of, are their stats worth their points? And the Ogren, Vanquisher, and the Hydra are all perfect examples of that. Actually, so is the Hellhound. Okay, Exterminator. This one is independently good. It's probably about here. So the thing about the Exterminator is it is one of the few tanks that I think a lot of people misunderstand. And the main thing is that Strength 9 Twin Linked means that you're winning the toughest targets in the game 5 out of 9 times. So it's a little bit better than wounding on 4s. So you can kind of think of the gun as like Strength 12, right? You're going to be wounding, or actually like Strength 14 even, because you're going to be wounding stuff that is tough 10 or above, basically on 4s, and anything that is strength 8 or below, basically on 2s, because you're on 3s rerolling. So it's just like a really efficient tank. It is a little expensive, but it really helps out in a lot of detachments, and it is really helpful with the Dorn being as strong as it is. Okay, next, is this the Eradicator? I think this is the Eradicator. I'm not impressed with the Eradicator. I'm trying to think of what to say about it. Like, the math hammer that I've seen people do about it is if you put it in cover up against like Ironstorm or like Ultramarines Gladius, it'll take 3 Ballistus Reds on average to kill an Eradicator, which is a lot of firepower that you're asking from your opponent. However, the things that it is actually like super effective against are like volume of damage too, which is mostly a thing that happens in melee. And the Eradicator doesn't really want to be in melee anymore because it lost the ability to shoot blast weapons into melee. So I think this one probably here. I guess I'm just not very impressed with it. Maybe if you took enough of them. Okay, honestly, if you're playing like a combined list and you want to be really good into like Star Shatter and Ultramarines, maybe you just put 3 of these in a list and call it a day. But even then, you're just like, your damage is so low. You're just relying on like, hey, here's 12 multi-meltas and there's also a gun on top. But that's about it. Okay, Executioner. This one I have feelings about. It's definitely meta dependent. So the big thing about the Executioner is one, it's by far the coolest Leman Russ. Like it just looks fantastic. Just the giant plasma cannon on top. Love the look of it. But the thing is, into the Executioner's preferred targets, which are like Terminators and Deathwing Knights and Exalted 8-Bound, it barely does more damage. It's going to kill like an extra half a model over a Luminous Battle Tank or an Exterminator. And if into your best targets you are only slightly better than tanks that you just kind of want to take anyway, it just kind of ends up lagging behind. Yeah, I think this one is like bottom of meta dependent, and it's because like I have a couple of extra points left over. I want to be particularly good into certain matchups, and therefore I'm going to turn like a Luminous Battle Tank into an Executioner instead. And I think that's really about it. Demolisher sucks. Um, like it was already a tank that was like not that exciting. Um, when it was D6 plus 3 shots, partly because it was overshadowed by the Luminous Tank Commander. Now, if you want a tank to just go stand in the front lines, you should be taking Vanquishers instead. So it's not it's not as overcosted as the Luminous Tank Commander, but I think it is undertuned is the main issue. And I think the Eradicator is as well. Because like the Luminous Tank Commander is overcosted because its abilities are really good. Like it just needs to come down in points. But the Eradicator and the Demolisher, I think are like they're undertuned. Like they would just have to be really cheap in order to be good. So like maybe they're in the same kind of thought as the Ogryn, Vanquisher, and the Hydra, where they're very points dependent. And while the Ogryn, the Vanquisher, and the Hydra are currently a spot where they are fairly aggressively costed, these are fairly, what's the opposite of aggressive? Defensively costed. Like they're just not that exciting. Manticore sucks. Nork, Nork sucks. Yeah, I don't really have a lot of strong thoughts about Nork. He was okay in like melee guard from Paul Clifton. Yeah, I honestly don't have enough thoughts about Nork. He's just like every time I look at him, I just go, why? Okay. Next, let's go ahead. I'm gonna leave this one towards the end. Ratlings. Ratlings are meta dependent. But they're also good in meta dependent. Like they could honestly be an argument like towards the bottom of detachment dependent. But the main thing that you just want Ratlings for is they are cheap infiltrators, and sometimes you can jail your opponent with them. Sometimes you put them in mechanized, but like if you put them in recon or siege or whatever, because there's just too many infiltrators or too many like heavy scouting armies like world leaders in your local meta, like then Ratlings become more and more exciting. But if you're playing against armies that don't really have that aren't like dealing with that or that don't require like this answer, they're just not that exciting. Like they're fine. Rogel Dorn. I think I forgot to duplicate this one, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm gonna go ahead and put the. This is going to be the Rogel Dorn Tank Commander, and the Rogel Dorn Tank Commander is definitely an independently good. So my general claim about the Rogel Dorn Tank Commander is all of our other tanks, except maybe the Exterminator and maybe the Luminous Battle Tank, which is really good and combined, the Rogel Dorn Tank Commander is the only one that is like worth its cost in basically every detachment. And the Rogel Dorn Tank Commander is just a good tank overall, and its rules are relevant in every game that you play the Rogel Dorn Tank Commander, because it is an independent tank that basically shoots on a 3+ and has a little bit more damage consistency than a normal Rogel Dorn. And it's just also a T12 2+ body. It's a Land Raider with guns, right? Like a lot of armies just don't have the tools to deal with this kind of lumbering behemoth, this kind of just massive lead belcher almost, right? It is just so powerful to just have around, and when all the other Leman Russes can only really be played in combined, except for like the Exterminator, the Rogel Dorn Tank Commander, that's why you see it as often as you do. That's why you see it in basically every detachment that's not recon. Is because it's just it's fairly aggressively caustic. I'd probably go up 5 to 10 points, but realistically, everything else would need to come down, and then the Rogue Lord Tank Commander is going to be less exciting. But with that, I think you generally are going to put Rogue Lord Tank Commanders in a list a little bit more, like in any list, in any detachment, a little bit more often than you're going to put Gaunt's Ghosts. Valkyrie, unfortunately, is just good for Crusade. It's not real, can't hurt you. I'm really sad that the Valkyrie is as bad as it is, so maybe someday soon it will get buffs, maybe it'll go down in points. But the transport is just not very exciting. It doesn't really have any guns. It's not that dirt. Like, it's okay. Um, it's harder to kill than a lot of people think it is, but it just doesn't have the reward for being annoyingly durable, and it's too expensive. Hydra, this thing sucks. Yeah, this thing just doesn't do anything, is kind of the main thing. I think the rule is just really, it's probably better than the Manticore, actually. Um, it's actually probably, like, if you are trying to tech against an enemy bridgehead list or an enemy tactical brigade list, and you are list tailoring, like, and you put one of these in, I wouldn't hate it. It's about the nicest thing I can say about it. Scions, independently good. These things are nuts. But the main reason why Scions are as good as they are is because Bridgehead and Mechanize exist, and the Militarum Tempestus Command Squad is an insane force multiplier. So that's why I'm not going to put Scions and build around, and instead I'm going to put them in independently good, because you have to think of them, there's two different units here. There's the 5-man Scion unit, which you can just put in any list, and it's going to be a better scoring piece than the Commissar, because they can deep strike. They aren't limited to coming off a board edge. The other thing, I mean, with deep strike, they can go into your opponent's deployment zone on turn 2, instead of having to wait for turn 3. And the other thing that you can do with them is a 10-man unit combined to Militarum Tempestus Command Squad is good in every detachment. It just does damage. It is very consistent with the damage output that it does, where even without the bridgehead or the mechanized rule, your meltas and your plasmas are going to be winning things on objectives, like the hardest things in the game, on 5s re-rolling, which again, you're going to wound 5 out of 9 times. That is more than half, so suddenly you just get a lot of consistency, and you can trade into just about anything. So, yeah, I think they are, again, right about Gaunt's Ghost and Rogodor and Tank Commander. You can just put them in any list, and it's going to be like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Deathcore Riders. Deathcore Riders. I'm trying to think of a meta where I would want these, is the major problem. They're fun. They're really annoying for people to, like, some melee armies to deal with, but they just don't have, like, any output. They're probably about here, to be honest. Like, the reactive move is nice. Doing funny dev wounds with Dryer is nice, but, like, it's not even that much. Okay, Minister and Priest. This thing is good for Crusade. Okay, Katachan Heavy Weapon Squad. Okay, Katachan Heavy Weapon Squad. So, I'm going to say, firstly, that the Katachan Heavy Weapon Squad is basically only mortars. I have tried and tried and tried to make the Katachan las cannons good. The problem is that they are really hard and mechanized. They are really hard to give orders to, because you have to specifically be playing to give your las cannons orders. So you have to put in, like, you have to basically double or triple their effective price point by giving them like a Stellan or putting them near Creed. And then you don't really want to put them in vehicles, so you have to set yourself up in order to get these weird strikes where your opponent just, like, is disrespecting you, right? I feel like Katachan las cannons are only good against bad players, um, and that's why I just like playing against the stronger players. Every time I do them, it's just like, just the stronger players just disrespect them, and they're just like, yeah, it's 3 las cannons, like, sure, whatever. I don't really care. They're not on a durable body, so when you fail to do anything, I'm just gonna kill them. I'm gonna kill them with incidental fire. I'm gonna kill them with the stubbers that I have tacked onto every single thing. So I'm going to put them in detachment dependent. But they are, in terms of being detachment dependent, they are one of the better ones as mortars because they're really good in bridgehead and they're still pretty good in siege. And the reason why they are the better heavy weapon squad than Cadians is one, they have a rule in terms of rerolling ones to hit and wound against vehicles and monsters, whereas the Overwatch rule of the Cadian heavy weapon squad, which I put down in meta dependent, um, is Scout 6. So the main reason, so the big value of that is there are going to be games where you play, and let's say you're playing in Bridgehead, and you have your unit of, or you have your 2 or 3 units of mortars, and you're playing into Chaos Knights. Chaos Knights do not take any damage from your mortars at all, and they tend not to run that many things in strategic reserve. They tend to start basically everything on the board. Maybe they'll start one brigand or one carnivore off the board, so you don't really need them to screen, which is their secondary job. Catachan mortars have Scout 6, and they're 50 points. So you can use these instead of using your Catachan, which is OC 20 and has a lot of bodies and a lot of real estate. In those matchups, I use Catachan heavy weapon squads as a thing that goes forward that's going to score me Area Denial and Cleanse on turn 1. And that's something that other heavy weapon squads can't do to the same degree because they don't have that bonus turn of movement off of Scout. Yeah, but still, even then, they're only really playable in Bridgehead and Siege, and you could probably get away with them in Recon. Like, maybe Catachan Las Cannons are okay in Recon, but I think Recon is also probably the most. You're giving too much power to your opponent when you're playing Recon. Like, if they're playing a list that does not care about your detachment rules, then, like, Recon just falls apart. Okay, next. Krieg Heavy Flamers. Or Krieg Heavy Weapon Squads, which is basically Krieg Heavy Flamers and the Red-Headed Stepchildren. Krieg Heavy Flamers are good. You can put these in every detachment. They're really good in mechanized. They are, and they're fine everywhere else. Like, they're not they're not going to be your best unit, but they are very good at coming in because they have an 18-inch range instead of a 12-inch range. You can put them in reserve. They are relatively easy to just pop on because their footprint that they have is relatively small, and you can just shoot people with them. Up against things like Gene Stealer Cults are also very hard and very annoying for your opponent to deal with because they're going to be taking generally 2 rounds of shooting from the Krieg Heavy Flamers. You're going to move out your 4 inches or 7 inches with move, move, move. You're going to flame them, and then when they try and move in with their melee pieces, you're going to overwatch them. So you're going to get a really effective trade with these pieces really often. Are they insane? No, I don't think so. But they are good. And with that in mind, I'm going to put them right up at the Scout Sentinel. I think they are still fairly useful at this level. Dryer is not even good for Crusade. Okay. Actually, though, he's just really undertuned or overcosted. There is going to be a meta at some point where Dryer comes down like, I don't even know what his cost is right now, but it comes down like 15 to 20 points. And if we continue moving towards an indirect meta, the fact that he can stand back up at the end of the phase is going to be relevant. Unfortunately, you just for his unit, which is I think it's 120 plus him, which is like 100, it's like 220-ish points of horses, and the dev wounds, like you're averaging doing like 7 dev wounds and like 4 or 5 like AP0 saves with the rest of the unit into hard targets. And at that point, it's like, well, I could have spent these points on something that does more damage. Krieg Command Squad. These are also just kind of undertuned. I think the Manticore and Nork and the Wyvern are all worse. The Great Command Squad just doesn't really have a rule. Like you can still do stratagems and have orders while battle shocked, but cool. Like I don't know. I don't really know what to say about that. Those are just like abilities I do not value. Okay. the artillery team. We're gonna put this one in detachment dependent. Where do I want to put it? I think it's here. I think it's not quite as good as the Castellan. The big thing about this is it is useful in siege regiment and it is useful in combined actually. And the main reason why it's useful in combined is it is a really good carrier of the new fields of fire stratagem. You use it. You have Creed standing next to the artillery team. You use fields of fire on it, and you pick a Dorn, and then you shoot the Dorn at that thing, and then you see if the Dorn kills it. And then if the Dorn doesn't kill it but leaves it low, now you have this Strength 12, AP 3, Damage 3 artillery piece that gets to shoot at it as well. And if the Dorn does kill it, well then darn. Now you still have this Strength 12, AP 2, Damage 3 cannon that you can shoot at anything you want on the board. And it's not going to do a ton of damage, but it's going to do a little bit of damage. And there are going to be certain metas, like into Creations of Bile, where it's very useful at being damage 3. It's going to be very useful into certain metas where like world leaders are spamming a bunch of 8-bat just because damage 3 is particularly nice. It's really nice in 2 detachments, and it is okay in it's probably okay in Bridgehead as well. I'd rather have the Field Runners batteries because they are better at hunting the things we want to hunt than the artillery team is. All right, let's talk about Krieg Engineers next. So the Krieg Engineers are just independently good. You can put these in every list you build, and they're going to be good. I want to talk a little bit about the difference between taking 5 mans and taking 10 mans. I'm going to take a sip of my Arizona. Okay, taking 5 mans and 10 mans is a really interesting distinction. And I will say that for 80 to 90% of players, maybe not that high, 70% of players, you're going to want to take 5-man engineers. And the main reason for this is because 5-man engineers are easy to use. You're going to move them forward, you're going to remote mine something, and you're going to grenade it, and then they're going to die. And as long as your remote mine goes off, they have traded up. However, I think for our top like 30-ish% of players, there is a very real argument to take 10-man engineers. However, I think you need to be better with 10-man engineers in order to get the most out of them. And the main reason for this is you have to look at what is very common in the local meta. Or not just the local meta, but currently the global meta. The global meta currently has a lot of things like the Ballistus Dreadnought or a Vindicator from Ultramarines, or really just about every like Space Marine variant is running Vindicators. And when you look at a unit of 10 Death Corps engineers getting shot at by a Vindicator is going to average d6 plus 3, which is 6.5, plus 2 blast for 8.5 shots on average into a unit of engineers. And then let me double check. Does it have a combi weapon? I think some of them have combi weapons. Me looking up rules live on camera. Vindicator. We're gonna just look at the Codex Space Marine ones. Demolisher Cannon, Hunter Kissel. Oh, it's a Storm Bolter. That's what it is. So if they get all their shots, so they're gonna average 8.5 from the Vindicated, from the Demolisher Cannon, and 4 shots from the Storm Bolter. Those 8.5, if they have Oath Engineers, which they probably won't, we can assume that they're going to hit 8.5. You're gonna hit 2/3 of them. We'll call it 6.5. And then every single one of those is basically going to kill a Krieg Engineer. So that's going to be about 6 or 7 engineers dead. And then the Storm Bolter with 4 shots, you're going to hit 3 of them, you're going to wound 2 of them, we're going to save 1 of them. So a Vindicator on average is going to kill like 8 or 9 Krieg Engineers, which is really important because so much of the power of engineers are in a single model, having one model alive so that you can chuck a grenade with it for free. And that is a really powerful ability, and the fact that it survives against a lot of things that are common in the meta and requires multiple activations from our opponents makes Krieg Engineers very, very valuable. And that's why I'm going to put them independently good. They are about as good as Flamers. Somewhere in here is where I'd probably put them. Okay, these last two data sheets I want to talk about in conjunction. Um, oh wait, not these ones. These ones, where did I put Cadians? Cadians are there. These are just worse than Cadians. Where did I put the Krieg? These are a little bit better than Krieg. I'm gonna put them towards the top of overcosted undertuned. Okay, I actually want to put this one. I want to talk about it in conjunction with the Cadian Command Squad. And there's a combination of units that Wesley St. Heinz has been using to better effect recently, and I haven't had a chance to test it because I don't have the models and I have to do it on DTS, which I don't love doing. But the unit is, you take a Cadian Command Squad, you give it as many special weapons as you can, um, and you give it an Ogre Bodyguard. And what this unit is it's 6 models that are running around, and you don't attach it to any Cadians or any Khazarkin. And it's just 6 models running around, and it is toughness 6 because you take the highest toughness in the unit, which is the Ogre Bodyguard. And because it is not attached to anything, you can immediately start taking wounds on the officer, which has a 4-up Feel No Pain. Or you can also choose to take it on the Ogre Bodyguard immediately, which has a 4-up Invul. It is a very tough unit to remove, and if you don't want to take saves on those, what you can do is you can take it on like your special weapons, and the meta pack is going to res D3 models per turn, but it can't res the officer and it can't res the Ogre Bodyguard. So you can take it on your guy with a Power Fist, you can take it on your guy with a flag, you can take it on your guy with a plasma gun, knowing that they're going to be coming back because you can just take saves on everything that is not the med pack guy. You leave the med pack guy alive for last, and this unit, it doesn't do a ton, but it trades very efficiently into Scout Marines, it trades very efficiently into Cultists, it trades very efficiently into these small like training pieces that your opponent is going to put out because it's toughness 6, right? Like there's not a lot. Space Marines, Renegade Raiders and stuff, they're going to have a lot of strength 5 attacks, strength 4 attacks, which are wounding this unit on 5s. And then we have a 4-up Feel No Pain and or a 4-up Invul. It just takes a lot to actually take this unit down, and that's where the strength of the Ogre Bodyguard comes from. It is directly tied to how powerful you think that combination of units is, and that's why I'm going to put it towards the bottom of detachment dependent. It's arguably that combination specifically is independently good, but I don't have enough testing with it, and that's why it's there. You cannot play Ogre Bodyguards the same way you used to, where you could just put them in like a giant brick of like Lord Solar or what do you call it, or a big Death Core of Krieg brick. Doesn't work that way anymore. But anyway, so these are all the units. Everything else that's down here are units that don't exist in the Codex anymore, and I was too lazy to actually remove from this. So this is the official Joushi tier list. Let me take a look and see if there's anything. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I don't think you build around Catachan. You just kind of put them in every list and call it a day. Khazarkin, Rogaldorn, Tank Commander. Oh, we're gonna pretend that the Rapier Laser Destroyer. I'm sure somebody's going to like go towards the end and be like, Joushi, there's no Rapier Laser Destroyer left in the Codex. So for all of you people who are actually listening to the video, thank you. We're gonna put the Rogaldorn, which is represented by the Rapier Laser Destroyer, up here towards the top of detachment dependent. You like it in Hammer, you like it in Combined. That's about it. But it's a pretty efficient tank, and the fact that it has the ablative plating makes it good in some specific matchups and some yeah. Yeah, anyway. Okay, so that's the Dorn. We got Scions, basically everything here. Like honestly, if you're building a list and you just take everything in these like top 2 rows and just like randomly like generate a legal number of units there, your list is going to be fine. Like honestly, even if you do it with the top 3, right? Like you just randomly decide like, I'll take 2 Roller and Tank Commanders and a Cadian Command Squad with an Ogre Bodyguard and 1 Lord Solar and an artillery team and, Catachan Heavy Weapons Squad and like random number of Flamers. Your list is going to be fine. You probably want to call it Combined Arms, but depending on like what exactly you get, you can change your detachment. It's going to be pretty okay. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And also, hi mom. If Morty and Glory is watching, or you're watching Morty and Glory for some reason, you know, hi. Yeah. Anyway, thanks so much for tuning in, you guys. I'm gonna go ahead and call this one a day and finish eating my peach candy. See ya. Bye bye.